before you listening, imagine this. What if one afternoon, while taking a simple nap, you suddenly found yourself unable to move, unable to open your eyes, and then heard a strange voice whisper directly into your ear? And what if that was only the beginning? Tonight's stories involve unexplained encounters, a collapsed house built over a hidden secret, and strange events that left everyone terrified. Whether you believe in the supernatural or not, these are stories that many people still cannot explain. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Before we begin today's horror stories, I want to share a strange experience that happened to me recently. Even though I spent a lot of time listening to and telling supernatural stories, I had never personally experienced anything like this before. I'm not even sure whether it was sleep paralysis or something else. So after hearing my story, you can decide for yourselves. The incident happened just yesterday afternoon. Earlier that day, I had been recording a horror story that took place in a hotel in Nha Trang. In that story, there was a scene where a hotel employee heard a voice saying, "Wake up." Because I had repeated that line several times while recording, the words remained stuck in my mind. After finishing the recording, I decided to take a short nap. While I was half asleep, I received a phone call from a man in Vinh Long. He told me that he believed he was suffering from a spiritual problem and wanted the contact information of a master who might be able to help him. I explained that I wasn't a spiritual master and that I only shared stories people sent to me. However, I gave him the information he needed so he could contact the person himself. After the call ended, I went back to sleep. About 5 or 10 minutes later, I entered a strange dream. In the dream, I was walking through a tourist area. The place was completely empty. There was nobody around except me. I started looking for my motorcycle because I was afraid it might be stolen. Eventually, I found it near the entrance gate. Someone had moved it into what looked like an old storage building. As I walked toward the motorcycle, something suddenly happened. I felt someone strike me hard on the back from behind. The moment I felt that impact, the dream disappeared. Suddenly, I became aware that I was lying in bed. I wanted to wake up. I wanted to open my eyes, but I couldn't. No matter how hard I tried, my eyelids refused to move. I could feel myself struggling, but my eyes simply would not open. At the same time, my entire body became stiff. I was lying on my side and wanted to turn over, but I couldn't move at all. It felt as though my entire body had been frozen. At that moment, I immediately realized that something strange was happening. Even though I had never personally experienced it before, I had heard many stories about sleep paralysis. So I began silently reciting prayers in my mind. I wanted to shout. I wanted to scream. But I couldn't do that either. I could still hear the music playing in my room, mixed with the music. I could also hear the voice of the man who had called me earlier that afternoon. His voice seemed to be speaking directly into my ear. Then, just as I was beginning to regain control of my body, I clearly heard another voice beside my left ear. It was the voice of a man. The voice said, "Wake up." The moment I heard those words, chills ran through my entire body. It was exactly the same voice I had used earlier while telling the hotel ghost story. Exactly the same. Even now, when I think about it, I still get goosebumps. The entire experience probably lasted less than 5 minutes, but it felt incredibly strange. I couldn't open my eyes. I couldn't move my body. I couldn't even open my mouth to speak. Eventually, everything returned to normal. To this day, I still don't know whether it was simply sleep paralysis or something else entirely. But I continue to believe one thing. If you never harm anyone, then no one has any reason to harm you. Now, let's move on to the first story sent in by one of our listeners. This story took place in Giang and caused a huge shock among the local people. The story is called "The House That Collapsed During Construction Because a Dead Man Was Beneath It." The events happened near the end of 2020. At that time, a man was building a new house. It was designed as a 2-story home with a concrete upper floor. Behind the property was a large abandoned pond. Nobody used the pond anymore. Nobody raised fish there. Nobody maintained it. Even the owner didn't know how long it had existed. The area around the pond was overgrown with coconut trees and thick vegetation. Many people bought land nearby, but most of them used the land only for family tombs and graves. Around the same time, a man we will call Mr. T purchased a plot of land next to the Storyteller's property. The two houses were practically neighbors. Everything that follows happened on Mr. T's newly purchased land. When Mr. T bought the property, there was already an old house standing on it. Behind that old house was a family tomb. Mr. T asked the previous owner whether all the remains inside the tomb had already been relocated. The owner assured him that everything had been moved long ago and that there was nothing to worry about. Unfortunately, that was only the beginning of a series of terrifying events. The first strange incident happened shortly after Mr. T purchased the land. The ground level of his property was lower than the main road, so he decided to have the area filled with sand to raise a foundation. However, because a large abandoned pond was located directly behind the property, workers had to run long pipes across the water in order to pump the sand into the lot. The moment construction began, problems started appearing. The pipes repeatedly came apart in the middle of the pond. The workers would repair them. A few minutes later, they would disconnect again. The same thing happened over and over. Work that should have taken only a short time dragged on from late afternoon until nearly 11 o'clock at night. Seeing so many strange interruptions, Mr. T became uneasy. He was a person who believed in spiritual matters, and the entire area was surrounded by graves and burial sites. Fearing that he might have disturbed something, he prepared offerings and prayed respectfully to any unseen spirits that might be present. After that, the sand pumping finally proceeded normally. At the same time, the Storyteller was also building his own house nearby. Coincidentally, both houses had the same design, a ground floor and an upper floor. Even more surprisingly, both construction projects were supervised by the same contractor, a man we will call Mr. D. When it came time to pour the concrete floor for the Storyteller's house, extensive preparations were made. The contractor installed more than 100 steel support poles underneath the structure to ensure that the concrete slab would be able to bear its weight safely. Everything was reinforced carefully. Meanwhile, Mr. T also planned to pour a concrete floor for his own house. The problem was that the construction team did not have enough steel supports available. Despite this, Mr. T decided to continue. Instead of using over 100 support poles like the neighboring house, his construction site had fewer than 50. Anyone with construction experience could see that the support system was dangerously weak. The floor could collapse at any moment. Eventually, the day arrived when concrete trucks came to both properties. The Storyteller's house was completed successfully without any issues. After finishing there, the trucks moved to Mr. T's house. The bathroom on the upper floor was located at the rear of the building. facing directly toward the pond. Because of the layout, workers began pouring concrete from the back section first. One worker held the concrete hose, while others watched the process. Mr. T stood nearby observing everything. The construction crew watched as well. Then something happened. Mr. D suddenly heard a sharp cracking sound coming from the steel supports below. Immediately, he realized something was wrong. The structure was not strong enough. If the pouring continued, the floor would not hold. He began shouting at the workers. "Stop! Stop pouring! The floor can't support the weight." He shouted repeatedly, but strangely nobody reacted. Not a single worker appeared to hear him. The construction site was busy, but not so noisy that his voice should have been drowned out. People standing much farther away later confirmed that they heard him clearly, yet the workers standing closest to him seemed completely unaware. They continued pouring concrete as if nothing had happened. Mr. D kept shouting. Nobody responded. For approximately 2 minutes, his warnings were completely ignored. The concrete continued flowing into the bathroom area. Then the floor finally gave way. Part of the bathroom floor collapsed downward. Fortunately, it was not a complete structural failure. The slab simply broke through in one section and dropped concrete below. The workers discussed the situation and decided to continue pouring concrete into other areas while planning to repair the damaged section later. So they moved the hose elsewhere and finished the job. Afterward, everyone stepped outside to examine the completed floor from a distance. Then disaster struck. Without warning, the entire floor collapsed. A tremendous crash echoed through property. The construction crew panicked. Workers ran in every direction. Mr. D rushed away from the site. Everyone was shocked. As people gathered to calm themselves, one worker suddenly spoke up. He was a Khmer man. The expression on his face terrified everyone. He said, "Before the floor collapsed, I looked downstairs and saw a man." Everyone immediately turned toward him. The worker continued. The man was completely black. He was very tall. He was standing beneath the house, and he was pulling out the steel supports. Silence fell over the group. According to the worker, he had watched the dark figure remove the steel poles one by one. The strange thing was that nobody else saw the figure. Everyone else only noticed that the steel support seemed to fall on their own. One support, then another, until the entire support system failed. As more supports collapsed, the floor eventually crashed down. Terrified by what they had heard, several workers searched through the rubble. If a man had truly been underneath the structure, he could have been buried under tons of concrete. They dug through the debris. They searched carefully, but there was nobody there. No body. No injured worker. Nothing. Mr. T became increasingly frightened. He invited a spiritual master to perform ceremonies and asked permission from whatever might have been occupying the land. After the rituals were completed, construction resumed. Eventually, the house was finished. For nearly a year, everything seemed normal. People believed the problem had finally been resolved. Then another shocking discovery was made. About a year later, authorities began developing the land behind both properties. The old pond was drained so the area could be filled and converted into a residential zone. As the water disappeared, workers noticed something horrifying at the bottom. Human bones. A complete human skeleton. Police investigated the remains. Their conclusion was that the skeleton belonged to an adult male. At this point, The original owner who had sold the property to Mr. T had already disappeared from the area. Wanting answers, Mr. T searched for him. Eventually, the former owner returned to the region for business. When questioned about the skeleton, he revealed a disturbing story. Many years earlier, a man and his family had entered the pond to bathe. For reasons nobody understood, the man never came back out. When someone drowns, the body usually resurfaces after some time. But this man never surfaced. His family searched everywhere. They reported him missing. They continued searching for a long time. Eventually, they accepted that he had died. Since the body was never recovered, the family built a symbolic grave and memorial shrine in his honor. Suddenly, everything began to make sense. Mr. T realized that the bathroom area, the first section of the house to collapse, had been built directly above that memorial site. After hearing the entire story, many people believe that the spirit of the dead man had been connected to the strange events surrounding the construction. Still, after the ceremonies were performed, no further disturbances occurred. Mr. T eventually believed that the spirit had finally found peace. Years later, before moving away, he decided to excavate the area beneath the bathroom one last time. He wanted to know whether anything else remained hidden below. To his surprise, fragments of human remains were reportedly discovered there. Although he never learned the man's identity with certainty, Mr. T arranged for proper burial rites and a suitable grave. From that moment onward, no more strange incidents were reported on the property. The land finally became peaceful. The next story took place during the same period while the storyteller's house was still under construction. Directly across from his property stood a barber shop. At that time, the house was unfinished. There were no stairs yet. Electrical systems had not been fully installed. Because valuable construction materials remained on site, the family slept near the entrance every night to guard the property. For several nights, everything was normal. Then one evening, the storyteller stepped outside to smoke near the road. The neighboring barber shop had already closed. While standing there, he suddenly heard a sound. Knock, knock, knock. The sound was coming from inside the barber shop. At first, he assumed someone must still be inside. But then he remembered something. Nobody ever slept in that shop. There was no staff room, no overnight employees. The place should have been completely empty. Yet the knocking continued. It sounded almost rhythmic, like someone tapping a wooden block repeatedly during a prayer ritual. Curious, he approached the closed metal door. The shutter contained small gaps that allowed him to look inside. Peering through one of them, he noticed a faint red light. The glow came from a small altar near the front of the shop, and in that dim red illumination, he saw someone, a young woman. She was sitting alone inside the barber shop. Her back faced him. She sat perfectly still, staring deeper into the darkness. He could not see her face, only her back. Feeling uneasy, he quietly walked away and returned home. The next morning, he asked the shop owners whether any employee had stayed there overnight. They immediately said no. Nobody had been inside. That answer sent chills through him. Still, he chose not to tell them what he had seen. How could he walk into someone's business and casually claim that he had seen a ghost there? A few nights later, another strange event occurred. While sleeping at a construction site, he woke up to a strange buzzing sound beside his ear. It sounded like damaged electrical equipment. The noise continued endlessly, Concerned that some construction device might be malfunctioning, he switched on the lights. The sound stopped instantly. The moment he turned the lights off, the buzzing returned. His son woke up as well. "What is that sound?" the boy asked nervously. The storyteller tried to ignore it, but sleep became impossible. Later that same night, just as he began drifting off, he heard a loud impact against the glass near the entrance. It sounded as though someone had thrown a stone at the house. Startled, he grabbed a knife from the kitchen and rushed outside. Nobody was there, not a single person. Days later, another incident occurred. While returning home from his mother's house during a heavy storm, he discovered that every electrical switch inside the unfinished building had become completely stuck. None of them would move. Lightning flashed outside. Thunder shook the sky. The interior of the house remained dark. Then, after several minutes, everything suddenly returned to normal. The switches worked again. The lights came back on. And just like before, there was no explanation. Interestingly, throughout all these incidents, whatever seemed to be present never fully revealed itself. The storyteller never saw a clear apparition inside his house. And after construction was finally completed, all of the strange occurrences stopped. The mysterious woman in the barber shop was never seen again. The buzzing sounds disappeared. The knocking ended, and peace returned. Whether these events were supernatural or simply coincidences remains unknown. But for those who experienced them, they were impossible to forget.